I have this file here is on my, I'll go get the one that's on my desktop. And it's not truly blank. I just left some geometry and some dimensions in there so we'd see what we were working with. What I like to start doing is drawing a very simple room, just to sort of get the basic tools in hand, and then move on to this one, which you can more or less proceed at your own pace, since you have all the information you need. If we just want to draw a not high architectural design, sort of the plan of that little room right there. Let's say that these inside dimensions are 12 feet 3 and 15 feet 4.5. And let's say that that little line right there is 6 inches. The door is 36. And from the window to there is 2 feet. And that's 5 feet wide, 5 feet 6 wide. And let's just assume all the walls are 6 inches. One thing I always try to do when I'm measuring a space, make sure the first thing you do is get your 2 main overall dimensions. Most of our rooms are essentially rectangular. And that's a really good basic tool to have done. So even if you sort of pieced it together, like this wall right here, which we're going to start with, is just a whole series of jigs and jogs. By the time you get to the end, we really have that overall distance correct. And having that to start with is really handy. As you saw the seniors working on it last week, it's tough with a 20-foot tape to measure a 40-foot room. If you know that the floor tile is 12 inches, you can count the floor tile and then measure the extras at the end. You can get a 100-foot tape. That's really hard to use with one person. You have to hook it behind something and pull it really tight. And the best tool is a laser rangefinder. This was a couple $100 a couple of years ago. You can now get them for $22.50 at Staples, or probably at Staples, Home Depot, somewhere like that. And the way they work, it shoots a laser beam, and you can see it there on the back wall. And it says 44 feet 10 inches. It's accurate to a 1/16 of an inch and 600 feet or something. It's really pretty extraordinary. I can now measure things by myself that I would have had to hire somebody for a day just to hold the other end of the tape. So it's really, really a great tool. Anyway, so this is here if you want to experiment with it. This is the on button. This is the find distance button, 4 feet 2 and 13/16. This little guy will hold it relatively perpendicular to a floor or a wall or whatever. Okay, so if we're drawing this room, I want to look at a couple of basic tools, drawing tools. Actually, we're going to use the line and arc, I guess, but then and using the modifying tools to create new ones just exactly where we want them. Okay, so we'll go to line. And if you remember, to draw lines that are straight across, we want to have ortho turned on, which is the easiest way to do it. And this little guy down here, when that's turned on in blue, that means ortho is turned on. And you can turn it off with F8, and you'll see that it'll disappear. It's turned off, and now it's turned back on again. And down there at the bottom, that's called the status bar, and it sort of keeps you informed about how AutoCAD is working. So you might think, line, okay, where do I start? You can start anywhere. The only time you really want to start in some particular place, like start drawing at the origin of the drawing, is if if this is a component that's going to be inserted into some larger assembly, like a hotel room going into a hotel floor or something like that. But for right now, you just put it anywhere you want. Line. And the easiest way to do something that's 15 foot 4.5 inches is it's just direct distance entry. You just indicate the direction you want it to go and type 15 feet, let's say 4.5. So there's 15 feet, 4.5. And the line tool is one of those that just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating until you hit escape. So we'll come down 12 foot 3. And I have to hit enter after that because it might be waiting for a 3.5 or a 3.5 or something. And then I'm coming back the same distance as before, 15, 4.5, 15 feet, 4.5. I don't have to put the inch mark on. A, it's a pain. B, it's not necessary. And enter. And then if I want to type 12 foot 3 again, I can do that. Or, as up here, I can just type C to close it, C, and then enter, and it'll go back to the point where we started. and that's the cleanest here. C and enter. And that terminates the command. I got these confused. The question is which of these is which? You know, when I initially drew this, I actually meant that this was 12 feet 3 and this was 15.4.5. But I sort of switched them around when I was doing it. Now, what's an easier way to draw a rectangle? The rectangle command. We could have done that, but I didn't want to use it this time because that makes those all one object, and then we'd have to explode it to be able to deal with individual lines. So right now, we're just doing lines today. We'll graduate to rectangles on Thursday. Okay, now we need to make these walls 6 inches thick to the outside. And that is the highly useful offset command. The shortcut is O. And what offset does is you pick any line. You know, if you wanted another line that was over here exactly 6 inches, you know, that's sort of hard to move it some in the X and some in the Y to end up with those being 6 inches apart. So what the offset command does is say, take any line in any direction and make the new one 6 inches off of it, whether it's horizontal, vertical, slanted. It can be an arc that gets offset that same distance. It can be a circle. It can be any sort of figure we want. So you need to do two things. One is pick the object you want to offset. Two is tell it to how far, and three is which direction, in or out. So we'll pick offset, and you know, I'm going to move this down here just for the time being. Let's see if it helps for having it right here. You can type the whole word offset if you want. So it says specify the offset distance. I'm just going to type 6 inches. And there's the 6. Then it says select the object to offset. I'll just start with this guy. And then it lets you move it back and forth until you click again to decide where it is placed. And the offset command is one of the ones that repeats. So we don't have to re-invoke it. It's just ready to go. We can pick this one, and it remembers the 6, and click down here. And when I got all 4 of them out there, I'll hit escape to terminate the command. Okay, now we've got these guys that aren't meeting. We would like them to meet. And that's the fillet command, whose real role is you give it 2 lines. It will create an arc of a given radius connecting the 2 lines. Let's say, you know, 12 inches or something. If we make the radius be 0, it just extends or trims them till they come to the same point. And that's whether they overlap or don't yet touch. So again, there are a couple of things we need to tell it, just the way that offset needed to know how far, fillet needs to know what that radius is before it can do it. So we'll pick the fillet command. And we got a couple of choices here, but the main thing is select the first object, but first we need to set the radius. And in this case, the radius, you know, let me go back up top, drag this back up. One thing that having that there, the command line here, is it doesn't let you see the previous lines. And so when I enter the fillet command, AutoCAD told me the current radius is 0, which is what we want it to be. That's good. So now we select the first object, and let me just start from scratch just to make sure we got everything going. So pick first object, second object, and then we can hit to do this again. We hit spacebar or enter, and we're back right in the same command with the same radius, and we can keep going around. I'm just hitting this in the spacebar just to make that command resume. And just to look at fillet for a little bit. A couple other ways to use this. F is the shortcut for fillet. These two that pass each other, you can use like that. These two that, you know, one would extend to each other, you can do that. Now I want to talk about different ways to select things before we go any further. Let's say I want to erase all of these guys right here without erasing these. And if there are a lot of them, well, it's E for erase. And I can start picking things. You know, and it sort of de-highlights them to know that when I hit enter, they'll be all gone. But that can get kind of tedious. You know, I can pick. A faster way, I'll type E for erase again, is we can use a windowing where basically I'm going to define the 2 points of a rectangle that contain those guys. So just a quick way to erase a whole room full of desks, for instance. And then once I'm done, again, when you finish selecting things and you hit enter, and they go away. Just for the sake of experiment, we want to put a 12-inch radius on these guys. I do F for fillet, and it's telling me right now your radius is 0. If I want to change the radius, most of these commands have several options at the end of how the command's going to work. And you'll see right there, there's a capital R for radius. So if I type R and enter, then it asks me for a new radius. And I'll say 12. Enter. Got to keep hitting enter. And then again, we can pick the 2 objects. And it draws that radius. To set it back to 0, we do fillet, enter. It tells me your radius is set for a foot. I don't want it to be a foot. I want it back to 0. So I'll do R, enter to reset the radius, 0, enter, and then I can do those guys. Okay, let's put the door in. We're just drafting. It's not a door. It's a rectangle and an arc and some extra lines. So what I do is draw these 2 lines first, and then trim out the hole. So probably the easiest way to do this is since we know that that's the door jamb is 6 inches down from that top line, I'm just going to offset this line down. O for offset. My distance is already set for 6, actually, since that was the same as the wall dimension. Specify offset distance. Okay, that's good. Then select the object to offset, and I want to offset this one down. We don't have to create that little line in exactly the right length and exactly the right position to start with. We can, most of these things we can use, create the lines from other objects, which we in this case just did here. I do need this line to cross that wall though. So I'm going to select it. If you remember from yesterday, we can just grab the endpoint of a line, click on its, select the line, which turns on its grips, select the endpoint, and drag it out. And I want to have ortho turned on for this to do that. So again, it's ortho is on, right? Select it and just drag, and we'll deal with these overlaps shortly. To get a 3-foot doorway, I'm just going to offset that line down 3 feet. Offset. Do 3 feet. I can enter 36 for 36 inches. I can enter 3 feet. Either one. Pick the object, and then tell it which side to go on. And if you click on the wrong side, you just do undo and do it again and do it in the right place. Notice that the offset command remains active. A lot of times you do one after another. So we're going to do, I'm going to escape to turn off the offset command. Now we're going to use a really useful tool called trim, which erases the sections of lines between other lines. Sort of goes from where you pick until it hits something else and then erases that piece. So I'd go to trim, and I'd start just by getting rid of these guys. And then go on to get rid of those. Okay, let's draw a door up here. And here I think we will use the rectangle tool because that will let us indicate this point, give it the dimensions, and then be able to drag it around in 9-degree increments to see where it wants to go. So rectangle or rec or rectang, I guess, any of these options. For that, we want to say, there's our corner point. Now we get a new set of options, and one of which is dimensions. So we can hit D up here for dimensions. Oh, also, you can just pick that. You can also just pick the D for dimensions. And it says specify the length for the rectangle, and we'll make this be 36. And the width, I don't know, call it 2 inches. I'll end up being in the right place. But it's that command sort of wants the final thing to do is to say where do you actually want that to go, and we can get it where you want it, and then click. Let's put an arc on that door just to show that it's operative. There are a bunch of ways to draw arcs, but what we know where the center of the arc is. That's the hinge point of the door, and we want it to start out here and come down to here. Arcs always are drawn counterclockwise, just so you know. So this is the start and this is the end, not vice versa. So if we go to arc, we'll see all these different options that the engineers love. We want to go right down to start, center, and end. Center, start, end. Sorry, yeah. And then with object snap turned on, which it should be, you're getting the little green square there. Okay, we say that's the center. The center point of arc, there's the center. The beginning point is out here. The end point is down here. I should say, no, you don't have to go through all this every time you draw a door in CAD. We can remember the door and the arc as it's called a block, and just insert them and trim stuff out around them. And there are automated tools that trim the holes in the wall. This is the stick shift method that we'll do for a while. It seems like the Mac version is not giving us quite all the options. Well, so here's what we do. If you just pick the regular arc command, it has some options. It gives us an option to specify the center right here. So let's type C for center and click. And then you can do start and end point. You just have to force it to say the first point we're picking is the center. The default way that arc works is to ask for a start point. But if you want to start with the center instead, you can either click on the word center there, or type C, which I'll do. And then it says specify the center point, which is here, the start point, and the end point. Let's put up some dimensions and then take a break. Let's say I drew this something about desk size rectangle here. Let's say we want to make that actually to be a 30 by 60 desk, and then move it into the office here. When we're selecting things, let me come back over to this group. We have a couple of ways to select things. One is as I mentioned, pick, enter, and then do whatever you want to do. Another is to window, and windowing, where you click once and then drag to the right, selects any objects that are entirely contained within that rectangle. So I'm getting that bottom triangle, but not the circle at the top. And now the circle at the top comes in because it's entirely inside that rectangle, and then I can move them or something. There's another selection method, and it's called a window crossing, where you can just be instead of going click, 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 you can click outside the group of objects you want, drag right to left, and you get this sort of green area with a dotted line, and that means it's going to select anything that's even crossed by that rectangle. So even though we barely touched this line here, it's been selected. And we need to use that method, the window crossing method, crossing window method, when we make major changes to a bunch of things at one time. For instance, if we went back and remeasured this room and found out that it was 16 4.5, not 15 4.5. Well, I would rather not have to move that one out and then move that one out and then trim all those guys all over again. So there's a great command called stretch, which moves the vertices of the selected objects. And move the vertex, then the object itself goes along. So the stretch command works like this. You can see stretch where it's an object sort of getting stretched out of shape. Stretch always uses this right to left crossing method. You just click here and click here. And then I finish selecting, I hit enter. And then it says specify the base point. I'm just going to click here. And just sort of like drawing a line a foot long, I just move my cursor in the direction I want it to go. Ortho is turned on, so it's straight. And I'll hit 1 foot. And now the whole thing's a foot bigger. I don't have to move lots of things separately and then clean them up. I just do that. So let me undo that. Let me move it like stretch it like 4 feet, just so we can really tell the difference. Stretch. Right to left crossing window, click, click. I finished selecting things, hit enter. Click anywhere. Indicate the direction I want it to go and say 4 feet. So the reason to show you the stretch command is this is not a 30 by 60 desk, but I want it to be without having to redraw it from scratch. This is maybe the second most used command after line in AutoCAD. So let's take the time to get it right, because you never want to erase stuff and redo it. You've already got it. It's close. It's the right color. It's the right layer. It's everything. You just want to a little further south. So stretch, and the shortcut is S because it happens so often. Stretch moves vertices, so I need to move the vertices of the vertical lines as well as the vertices of the horizontal lines, the endpoints. So stretch. Click, then move the cursor. Right to left with the green dotted line rectangle and click again. I could be selecting more objects, but I don't want to. I've done selecting objects, so I'll hit enter. And it says specify the base point. And I'm just going to click here, move my cursor down, type 3 inches. There you go. Well, let's make this a 2'6" desk, so we can move one side in or the other side in. Doesn't matter. We do want to include this dimension up here. So I got to stretch. Probably do this. Click, click. Hit enter because I'm done selecting. Click, and then just move it in the direction I want it to go. And I want to move. You can, if you want, you sort of just keep an eye on the dimensions there until it's 2'6", but it's sometimes a pain to get it. And I know I want it to move from 210 to 2.6, so I'll do it 4 inches. And there we are. Well, I tell you, now that we have a desk that's the right size, copy it into the room just to start laying out this office. So I would like to copy the 4 lines that make up the desk, but not the dimensions themselves. You don't need that, just confusing. So let's use copy. That's also CO. And if I click out here, it's going to grab the dimensions. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to do it from here to here. So it grabs the lines, which are all entirely contained within it, but doesn't pick the dimensions, which are not included in that rectangle. So that's a click and a click. And again, with AutoCAD, when you're done selecting stuff, you hit enter. And lots of these tools have a base point and base point and second point. We can just pick here. Doesn't have to be on the thing itself. If I want to drag it straight in, I can do that. If I need to turn ortho off, I'll hit F8, and I can put it anywhere I want. And copy keeps on copying until you hit escape. Let's do some dimensions and take a break. The dimension tool is right here under annotation. There are two basic ways to use this tool. One is just to select an object, and AutoCAD will then put a dimension from one end to the other. The other way to do this, and we can just use dim for dimension, DIM, is to select not an object, but to select two endpoints, and then it will dimension explicitly from those two endpoints. They don't have to be the endpoints of the same thing. It could be the endpoint of this line and the corner of this rectangle, however you want to use that. I almost always do it from endpoint to endpoint, just how I learned how. The dimensioning tools also respect ortho. So if we have ortho turned, let's do a line. So if I have an angled line and ortho is turned off, and I run a dimension from point to point, I'll get a dimension like that. If ortho is turned on, and you go to dimension, AutoCAD will let you choose between one of the two horizontal and vertical dimensions. One of the things that we can do here is selectively show information. For instance, you might not want these desks to show up. So instead of erasing them or moving them somewhere, we're just going to turn them off. The way that AutoCAD and really almost every CAD and drafting program since then has used the idea of layers, and it really comes from 2 years after I got out of graduate school. I actually worked drafting, and we would sometimes want to use the same walls, but show with the walls we'd show a ceiling plan and electrical, we'd show furniture, we'd show fire safety, all those things showing only one of those at a time. And the way we did that was having our main sheet of Mylar or vellum with the title block would have the floor plan on it. And then on top of that, in Register, we'd have sheets of Mylar that we draw the furniture on. Another sheet of Mylar that have the lighting plan. And then if I wanted to show just the floor plan and the title block and the furniture, I would take those sheets together and run them through the blueprint machine and get a print with walls and furniture. And then I come back and remove the furniture piece of Mylar, put the ceiling plan Mylar, run those back through the blueprint machine, and then I have those all printed together. All this being on transparent paper, transparent stuff. With CAD systems, we still have that idea of layers of information. They sort of borrowed that idea, but they're ones that we can turn on and off through the program, not by separate sheets going into the blueprinting machine. So right now, let's turn on the layer properties palette. You can see it's right here. And I would like to move this. How do I move it? Grab it over here and stick it next to the properties palette if you have that open. Drag this out and get as much information on the screen as we can. I can drag this, there we go, right there. So what we're getting here in the Layer Properties Manager is the names of layers, and we'll be creating some more for walls and furniture and dimensions. And each one of them can be turned on or off in a given view. It can have a color in a given view. other characteristics. But for the time being, I would like to create layers for walls, for furniture, and dimensions. And as I recall, we just right click out here and say new layer. And by default, it's called layer 1. I'm just going to backspace across that and call it walls. Right now, AutoCAD always comes with and always has this layer 0 that we've been working on so far. You can't delete it. But let's change the color of the walls layer to something bright and shiny red, just so we can see them. At this point, everything is on layer 0, but if I select a given line, then I can change its layer over here in the properties palette to walls. At which point it turns red, and we say, oh, I'm using red for walls. That must be a wall. And AutoCAD and most other drafting programs have a very color-centric way of dealing with stuff. The way we keep track of what things are and how they're used, and especially what will be turned on and off when we decide to plot different things is with color. I've got 2 palettes going here. One is the properties palette, and the other is the layer palette. And what I did with the wall was to select this line, and then in properties, I can change its layer to walls. So really anything about these objects can be changed. Anything we know about them, color, line type, length, that kind of stuff can be changed over here in properties. Let's create layers for the other objects in the drawing. We've got walls, so let's add layers for furniture, dimensions, and doors. And I keep them short just so it takes up less room on the screen. The point of having the color red assigned to the walls layer is that every object that is a wall, select, we are going to say these are all on the wall there. Drop down. And they will all change color based upon the layer that they're on, not based upon just making each one of them red. So let's do that. Let's pick most of your walls. And in properties, change their layer to walls. Do a command, and it says select some things, and you go pick. Then you hit enter to say I'm done. If you're just selecting things and then going over to palette, you don't have to. So I'm just picking the objects, going directly to layer, and changing it to walls. Your teacher might say, red walls? What are you thinking? Please make your walls blue. Now, if you've got 100 walls, you don't want to go through and pick them each. You just change the color of the layer, and they all change. So I've got a bunch of walls, a bunch of lines on the wall layer, and the wall layer is red. If I change the wall layer to blue, now let's go green so we can see it better, then they all change to green. Let's create these layers for walls and furniture, furniture and dimensions. Guess we need another one, don't we? It really, and then maybe another one for the door swing. You know, where does this end? You know. Yes, but you're entirely correct. A for the day. Right click, new layer. New layer, dim. New layer. Here's a way to work that I want to work, will make your lives lots easier, is all these objects over in properties, you want to see that they're picking their color up by the layer that they're on. You can use the drop down and just make it a color, but then they don't change. You can't, you know, 3 of them are purple and 3 of them are red and 3 of them are blue. You can't. So you always want to leave color being set by layer. And then when you change the color of the layer, then all the objects on that layer change color. And that's helpful sometimes if you're switching from a light screen to a dark screen, for instance. And also tell me something. Would you rather that this screen that we're looking at appear as light lines on a dark screen, or colors? You don't need to go here just for time being. To me, this feels more like I'm drawing. Okay, I'll show that in a minute. But the reason I ask is maybe when you switch to white screen, this you can't see this green very well. So I might want to just change the door layer to a darker green, just so I can see them better. And they all change. We don't have to go through and pick individual ones. You know, the dark is like neon and Elvis paintings on black velvet and CAD screens. I'll switch back and forth. But you can see that if you do want to change your screen, and Mac people will see where this is in the AutoCAD button. Down at the bottom is options, and this is just like preferences in the Adobe programs. And there's a lot of stuff here, but on this first page under display, go to colors, and we'll get into this, but it's this first one, uniform background. What color do you want it to be? You can make it anything you want. I'm sticking with white and black for now. For the desks, I don't want to have to go through and pick each of those lines, you know, to do this. So I'm going to take my furniture layer and make it some other color, like, you know, orange or something, brown. And then to select all these inside here at one time is what I really want to do. I'm going to use the window. I just click out. I don't have, it's not a command active selection, just happens all by itself. Click outside and then click here. So the only thing that's included are the desks. And then when you pick a lot of things, what's left over here are what they have in common. You know, I can't do it's, you know, obviously their X and Y and areas and stuff will be different, but I can change their layer from layer 0 to the furniture layer, and then they all turn brown. Another reason for having things in layers is we can tell each layer how thick to plot when we get around to plotting it, how thick and what color. So we can be having our wall lines with a heavier plotted line and our furniture with light in and the door somewhere in between. While we're at it, let's do the door, give it some other color. Now for these two, if I do a window, I'm probably going to pick up some other pieces of stuff. So I'm going to use the crossing window, which is the one that goes from right to left. I click, all the objects that are crossed by that rectangle are selected. And then I can stick them on the door layer, go to this drop down. Here's another thing. Every different architecture firm in the country has different colors for stuff. It's crazy. That's one thing that Revit completely did away with. As you'll see, it's a better tool for a lot of what we do, but this is a sort of a standard drafting program. And lastly, let's give our dimensions some color too. Dimensions are not by default on a dimension layer. Pick my dimensions, put them on a layer, and give the layer a color. Okay, let's go. In the next 15 minutes, without copying anything, when you're drawing things, you can draw them on any layer and then move them around to another one. Or you can draw them on the correct layer to start with, either way. But what you're going to find, the reason I'm saying doing this is the more you do this, the better you get. if in your new drawing you want to be making, you want to just be drawing on the walls layer, instead of drawing them on layer 0 and then changing them, over here in the layer properties manager, you can right click on the walls layer, set it to be the current layer,